Hi, thanks for joining us. My name's Linda Bird, and I lead the new implementation support team here at SNOMED International. Our team's role is to assist implementations that use SNOMED to get the most from the terminology. So this includes our 42 national release centres, their healthcare providers, their research organisations, and their knowledge and software vendors. What this support looks like will be different in each country, depending on the eHealth maturity, their plans and objectives of each member. But our aim is to support adoption of SNOMED in each country the best way we can. This webinar was actually inspired by feedback from a survey that we put out to inform the development of our implementation support services. There was a few suggestions made about helping implementers and vendors to keep up to date with the ongoing changes and improvements being made to SNOMED CT. So with this in mind, today we will be presenting a community briefing of the latest developments from SNOMED International with a focus on things that are relevant to implementers. Today's webinar will be presented by the SNOMED International Implementation Support Team, which consists of myself, Anna Hoyen, Alejandro Lopez-Osornio, and Kai Cooley. After my short introduction, Anna will let you know what's been happening in the content area. Alejandro will then explain some recent changes in the international release process. Anna and Kai will then talk about some tools and specification updates, and then I'll show you some of our new implementation support resources. But firstly, I'd like to give you a little bit of background to set the scene for the other topics. SNOMED International, as I'm sure you all know, is a not-for-profit organisation that owns SNOMED CT and maintains the international release on behalf of our members. So our core product is obviously SNOMED CT, but SNOMED International also provides a range of other products and services to help support the successful adoption of SNOMED CT globally, including tooling, education, customer and stakeholder support, and implementation support. So in today's session, we're going to provide an update on some of the latest developments from SNOMED International in all of these areas. We'll consider SNOMED CT content itself, both in terms of the current clinical focus areas and changes to the international release processes. In the tooling area, we'll look at some of the recent developments in browsing, querying, and deploying terminology services. We'll explain some of the recent updates to our ECL query language, and we'll show you our new mapping tool, Snap to SNOMED, that's available to everyone, for everyone to use. We'll also show you some new implementation support resources. We're not going to talk too much about our education courses and other services today, but at the end, I'll show you some links to these for you to look at. Before we start, I'd like to emphasize that today we will be speaking about updates to the international edition of SNOMED CT and our international tools and services. So if you use the international edition directly, or you maintain an extension that is directly based on the international edition, then a lot of what we're talking about today will be relevant to you. However, if you consume a national or local edition of SNOMED, then please just keep in mind that the content, the release processes, and the tooling that's relevant to your SNOMED edition may be different. So please just keep that in mind throughout today's session. So for example, if you're directly using the international edition, then you may choose to take advantage of the more frequent releases that Alejandro will be talking about shortly. And you can update your clinical system in January, April, July, and October, or whenever works best for you. And if you directly consume a national edition or a local extension, then obviously you need to update your clinical system based on your local release cycle, which may be different. So please just keep this in mind. And finally, just to set the scene for all the different types of implementations in which SNOMED CT is used. It includes clinical data entry and data integration systems, solutions that support the sharing of clinical information, point of care analytics such as clinical reports, summaries and decision support, population analytics, including trends analysis, pharmacovigilance and clinical audit, management analytics like analysis of health system value, and clinical and scientific research. And to find out more about how SNOMED provides value in these different areas, please visit value.snomed.org. So I'm going to leave it there and pass it over to Anna for the first update. Thanks, Anna.
Thank you, Linda. So I'll just take over the screen here. Thank you. So hi, everyone. I'm going to just provide you with a brief overview of the focus areas for the SNOMED International content team, which may be relevant to you as implementers of SNOMED CT. So there. So let's talk a bit about the triggers for content activities and content projects. They can be divided into three categories. Firstly, we have requests for content additions and updates from our members and affiliates. Secondly, we have internal projects. And thirdly, external projects that are promoted by collaborations. And with respect to content requests, these are submitted via our request submission service and are dealt with continuously. And as you can see here, we have received more than 5,000 requests the past year, and more than 92% of these have been addressed. Looking at the internal projects, the general objectives of those are to continuously enhance the quality of SNOMED CT to ensure proper and consistent modeling of the content. So from an implementation perspective, this work impacts implementations because they ensure that consumers of SNOMED CT can trust the semantic accuracy and the quality of the terminology. And this is a prerequisite for efficient use and interoperability of clinical data. Considering the internal projects, the quality initiative continues to be a focus area for the content team. The quality initiative began in 2018, and it has focused on improving the structural consistency of SNOMED CT content. The primary area of work in this project thus far has been the clinical finding hierarchy. And for the past year or so, 7 different areas within the clinical findings and disorders domain have been under review. This includes concepts related to teeth or tooth, mechanical lesions, and displacement disorders. This year, the QI work will move on to the procedure hierarchy, and this work will involve analyzing and improving various procedure types, such as computed tomography, bone grafts, and arthroscopy. Within the area of anatomy, the focus has been to implement a concept model across body systems. And this is a huge and complex piece of work, but nevertheless, it's very important because these concepts are used highly in the modeling of clinical findings and procedures. So therefore, you can say that if the anatomy is not modeled correctly, then the content within the clinical findings and procedure hierarchies will classify incorrectly. So that's why the anatomy content is so extremely important. Within the drugs and substances area, work is being carried out to improve the content. For example, by identifying concepts that use roles and other products in their modeling. And in a future release, role groupers and products will be transitioned from the substance hierarchy to the medicinal product hierarchy. Finally, we have the work done to ensure that SNOMED CT contain the content required for us to develop the map to ICD-11. And this work involves a gap analysis, and every 6 months, around 500 new concepts within the scope of SNOMED CT is added to the International Edition. So the vast majority, around 99% of the ICD-11 disease and mortality content that are found to be within the scope of SNOMED CT has been added. So moving on to look at some of the external content projects relevant to implementation is the SNOMED CT to Orphanet mapping work, which is the result of a joint project carried out under a collaboration agreement between Infern and SNOMED International. So based on an agreed priority set, new concepts for rare diseases as they are defined in OrphaNet are added to SNOMED CT, and a map is maintained and distributed. Also, the content team continues to make the additions required by Kaiser Permanente to align with the CMT, and more than 700 new concepts were added the past year in relation to this. Work is also being done in the area of findings and disorders related to epilepsy. And this work is supported by subject matter experts from the International League Against Epilepsy, ILAE. The work includes the inactivation of outdated components, addition of missing clinically relevant concepts and descriptions, as well as correction of the modeling and hierarchical structure as required. Similarly, more than 200 concepts relevant for cancer synoptic reporting has been added or updated. And this work is done as part of the Cancer Synoptic Reporting Project. The work is relevant to many of our member countries, such as US, Canada, UK, Australia, Sweden, and the Netherlands, where this content is used to record pathology examination of cancer specimens. A significant piece of work has also been carried out by the Nutrition Care Process Clinical Project, which has resulted in the addition of around 200 concepts related to nutrition. This includes both observable entities, clinical finding, regime therapy concepts. Finally, within microbiology, there's an ongoing member-driven focus on adding content as required. So this was a brief overview of some of the key focus areas when it comes to content development. And aside from this, updates and new developments are also carried out in relation to maps and linkages to other code systems. And this work is particularly important for implementers of SNOMED CT because these maps are important to make SNOMED CT function as a common terminology or a hub between the various code systems used within healthcare. Some of the maps maintained by SNOMED International are updated monthly, and some are updated annually, and others are updated when required and agreed. At a monthly basis, we make updates to the map from SNOMED CT to ICD-10 and ICD-0 respectively. In the past year, more than 1,600 concepts have been added and mapped to obtain a complete map from SNOMED CT to the ICD-10 2016 release, and more than 100 concepts have been added as a result of the ICD-0 3.2 review, or they have been added due to content requests. At a yearly or bi-yearly basis, we maintain other maps as well. For example, the map between SNOMED CT and MEDRA. This mapping is bidirectional, and this is manifested via two map reference sets. One reference set for the MEDRA to SNOMED CT map, and another reference set for the SNOMED CT to MEDRA map. So SNOMED International and ICH have entered into a collaboration agreement for an initial period of 5 years to support the ongoing maintenance and updating of these two map reference sets. I've already mentioned the map between SNOMED CT and OrphaNet, but the latest release of this map links from the July 2021 version of the international release to OrphaNet July 2021. Then we also provide the map from SNOMED CT to GMDN, which is the Global Medical Devices Nomenclature. And while the SNOMED International Edition is moving to monthly releases, you will hear more about that soon, the SNOMED CT to GMDN simple map package of SNOMED CT will remain on the current biannual schedule of March and September. Each release of the map aims at ensuring alignment of the SNOMED CT device content with the latest published release of GMDN. We also have other maps going on, such as the linkage between SNOMED CT and LOIC, but here new versions are developed when required and agreed, and currently a project has been established to update and expand the post-coordinated expression representing LOIC terms, RefSet, based on the latest version of LOIC and SNOMED. And the LOINC expression set has been updated to reflect the LOINC version 2.71. And then we have the map from SNOMED CT to ICD-11, and this is still in preview. So during 2019 and 2020, SNOMED International worked with suppliers to prototype the automated creation of map between SNOMED CT and ICD-11, mortality and morbidity statistics. And this work and the subsequent feedback led to a project during 2021 to produce a full map from SNOMED CT to ICD-11 MMS using the same techniques, providing a pragmatic and cost-effective solution to our members and their immediate needs with regard to reporting using ICD-11 MMS. The map automation work has just been completed, and it's available on request via info@snomed.org for use in testing environments working with ICD-11 MMS. Mapping to the ICD-11 foundation layer is still being reviewed. And aside from the content development tasks, the maps and linkages to other code systems, we also provide and maintain a number of additional derivative artifacts, and these include free sets and subsets. The overview you see here on this slide is not an exhaustive list, but it's here to illustrate some of the key free sets and reference sets distributed by SNOMED International. The majority of these sets may be explored in the SNOMED International SNOMED CT browser, and the associated release files are available on using our MLDS service. Many of the derivative artifacts are results of the work done or supported by clinical reference groups, external projects, and implementations. So with this, I would like to hand over to Alejandro, who will talk about the changes that have been made to the international release.
Thank you very much, Anna. And now let's go through, through the latest release changes. So SNOMED evolves not only in content, but also in the structure of the releases, how this content reaches the implementers and the users. And all the changes that we will summarize today have been already went through all the process of consultation with the community of users that were announced with all the proper time in advance and everything. So people have time to adapt to these changes and are not disruptive, but actually provide new features. And one of these changes is related to increasing the semantic expressivity in SNOMED. You know that description logic is the description, the representation of semantic knowledge that is used in SNOMED for formal reason. So the attributes, the relationships that we use to define concepts are following this technique, which is description logic. And description logic also advances, and there are new profiles that are useful for SNOMED. For example, general concept inclusions, property transitivity, property change, multiple and nested definitions, and concrete domains. These are very technical features, but this allows the authors to create concepts in a way that is much more easy to maintain and creates a more adaptable hierarchy in SNOMED CT. So these new features were required for new projects. Many of these were used in the international drug model and the proposed national drug extension model. So it was important to be able to leverage these features of description logic that were not available before. So in order to do that, the stated relationships file was replaced with the axiom reference set. This is old news because this happens in 2019, but this is key to understand how the content has evolved and how new things were added based on this feature. Previously, the authors created the attributes of each one of the concepts in the SNOMED CT using the stated relationship files. Yes, and the stated relationship file then went through a classification process and created an Infern relationship file, which is the one used in implementations. Implementation use the blue one, relationship file, and never use the stated one. The stated one is used to create more content or to create an extension. So the change is that now the authors, instead of using this basic stated relationship file, they use an improved all axiom ref set, but that includes all these features we talked before. And now the all axiom ref set creates the same Infern relationship file that everybody used before, and a new file, which is the concrete value file that we'll show you just now. Before we had these features available, when one of the definitions need to refer to a number. For example, this is a product in the drug model. The count of the number of base active ingredients is 1. It's referring to a concept that has the name 1. Yes, this is a concept ID, and it was a concept before. Or the strength that is 500 now it was 500, a concept that had the 500 in the fully specified name and the preferred term. So this was not possible to use actual numbers. And now, leveraging these new features in the axioms and description logic, we can actually use numbers in some of the attributes. Yes, these are attributes that always go with the number. So this 500, or this one tablet are actually numbers that can be subject to mathematical operations and used in implementation in a more powerful way. So this is one of the improvements. And this impacts the release in a way where the stated relationship file is no longer available. Yes, so now you have the all-rested axiom, and implementers have at their disposal the concrete value file. So all the relationships that have a concept as a target are stored in the infer view, in the infer relationship file, like always, and you will find it there. But all the relationships that have a number or a string as a value are recorded in the concrete value file, which is a separate file that you can use now in implementations to filter content or to perform search. Also, following this trend of improving the situation for implementations, it was necessary to do more frequent releases. Yes, so COVID is one of the examples how it creates a pressure for terminologies to adapt fast, and there are many others. And also, when the users submit content and request content to the International Edition, ideally you will want to have this content that you requested as soon as possible. And with the 6-month cycle, if you request content just before the end of a cycle, maybe it's bumped to the next one, and maybe you need to wait almost a year to get the content that you have submitted. So more frequent in releases is key for different kinds of implementations. Typically, SNOMED was released twice a year. From 2002 was released on January 31st and July 31st, every 6 months. In March 19, 2020, it was necessary to do an out-of-cycle release to update to COVID naming standards and a specific COVID content. So the process started to introduce a more frequent releases as the norm. So in January 2022, the monthly releases started. And now we have monthly releases in February and the end of March and the end of April. Note that it's always at the last day of the month. It's not exactly the same day number, but at the last day of each month, a new release of SNOMED will be available. The users are not expected to upgrade to each monthly release. This should not be felt as a pressure to implementers to say, now I need to update every month. But actually, you can create your own update periods. But the problem is that the deltas, yes, are not useful for all users. Previously, the release package contained a list of changes from the last release. But now that we release so often, and the implementers can decide how often they want to update, the fixed deltas are not that useful. So SNOMED created a delta generation tool, a delta generation tool that will allow you to create deltas, list of changes starting from any release and ending on any release. So if you want to update every 3 months, you can create a delta about this that describes the changes between these 2 dates. So therefore, the International Edition does not include delta files starting from January 22. So if you open the packages now, you will find that there are no delta files there. And that's because it's expected that you will create your own deltas using the delta tools. And as other editions are moving to do these more frequent releases, they will probably move to eliminating deltas as well. So deltas are eliminated from packages, but they are still vital and really important as a simplified way to update terminology errors. And now Kai will show us how the RF2 delta generator tool works. Thank you, Kai.
Thanks, Alejandro. Hello, everyone. I will attempt a quick demo of the delta generation tool. So the generated tool has been produced to allow implementers to create their own Delta archives as needed between any two releases. So a specific Delta can be generated containing the changes since the last release that you imported into your tooling. So obviously you can skip months if you need to, and you only need to import one Delta when you generate. So generated Deltas using this tool can contain multiple updates for the same component unless the latest state flag is used. This is a command line tool, which I'll demonstrate now. So I'm going to head over to the GitHub page for the tool. And obviously there's a README and it explains the usage. I'm going to show how we can generate a Delta using the latest state flag. I'll download the latest release. And I'm on a Mac, so I'm opening terminal, but it works, being Java, it works on Windows and any other platform. So I've got the Delta generator jar file, and following the instructions in the README, I'm going to use Java -jar Delta, and this actually outputs the parameters that are needed. And in this scenario, let's say that we have imported the July 2001 release last for the International Edition, and we want to upgrade to the April 2022 release, obviously skipping the monthly releases in between and skipping the January 2022 release as well. Well, not skipping, but incorporating. So the way we do that is we put in the previous effective time that we have already imported. So it's not the first release that you want to import, it's the one that you last imported. So that's this effective time. Then we give an archive path. So you would go to MLDS and get the archive. I've done that already. And this is the new archive, the latest one. So in this scenario, we're going for the April release, and I want to use the latest state flag because then I don't get multiple rows for some of the same components, which confuses some tooling. You need to use the latest state flag to create deltas that can be imported into Snowstorm and many other tools as well. So I'll run that now. It takes 20 seconds or so, not too long. But here's one I created earlier. As you expect, you end up with an archive with the same name as the input, and it includes all the Delta files of all the full files that were in there. Okay. Yep, that's it. Thanks, Alejandro. Back to you.
Thank you, Guy. Let me go back. And the next feature that we would like to showcase is the improved map representations. So all maps have an implicit directionality. They have been designed for the direction of use in mind, like, for example, from a classification to SNOMED, or from SNOMED to a classification, more typically the latter, from SNOMED to a classification, or from a terminology to SNOMED. And usually the maps we had today were directed from SNOMED to the classifications, but there are new use cases that have been brought by agreements with new terminologies and organizations like Anne described before. And the existing file formats and metadata were not adequate for these maps because it was not clear how the map is designed. So now we have made some updates to the way maps are described. One update is to the name of the map groupers, of the map types. You know, this is a simple map type, yes, but now the simple map is called simple map to SNOMED CT. This is the same concept that has not changed, yes. So the simple map to SNOMED CT it's a new way of mapping things. Sorry, this is, yeah, and the naming is wrong. This is from, and the one below is to. So the map the classic we have now is map from SNOMED CT. With the same concept ID, the term now reads map from SNOMED CT. And we added the new map type that is the map to SNOMED CT reference set. And we can see how the classic maps like RT to SNOMED now have been renamed, also including the name, the word to, expressing the directionality, and how the ones that go in the other direction have the same way. Yeah, so you will find in the text of the maps a very clear representation about if you go from the terminology to SNOMED or from SNOMED to the terminology. And also the name of the columns that are used in the map have been renamed in the ref set descriptor. So the reference and component ID may be the map source or maybe the map target, and the value that is added in the map, the external terminology value. In some cases, the external terminology value is the target, and in some cases, the external terminology value is the source. So all the metadata related to maps have been increased to and updated to be able to represent the directionality clearly. And the first map to be released is the MEDRA map that is bidirectional. So you have a MEDRA map to SNOMED and a MEDRA map from SNOMED. And it will be released but it has been released at the end of April, in the release of April 13th, 2022. So thank you. This is my last update. And now we go back to Anna.
Thank you, Alejandro. I'll just take over the screen. Okay, so I'm going to start this update on the new developments and enhancements to our tools and specifications. And then I'm going to hand over to Kai, who will elaborate on the newest version of the expression constraint language and the newest features of Snowstorm. But the first tool that I want to bring your attention to is our new mapping tool, which is called toSNOMED. And before we look at the tool, I'll just give you a bit of background. So one of the initial tasks that many implementers need to undertake in their adoption of SNOMED CT is to map existing local or proprietary codes to SNOMED CT. But in order to manage maps effectively, it requires a tool that is able to track changes to the map and is also able to support the upgrade to new versions of SNOMED CT. Because managing maps in simple spreadsheets is not a feasible approach because it increases the complexity of maintaining a map and it highly increases the risk of human errors. So therefore, SNOMED International commissioned CSIRO to develop a tool for mapping to SNOMED CT, and this tool is called toSNOMED. And toSNOMED is an online tool that supports the collaborative authoring, review, and maintenance of simple maps to SNOMED CT. The tool and the user guide can be found at the two sites you see here. snap.snomedtools.org will take you to the tool, and snomed.org/s2sud will take you to the user guide. But let's now go into the tool, and what I'm going to show you here, this will be very brief. I'm not going to show you all the features, but I'll just show you how to log into the tool, create the principles of creating a new map and importing a map file, and then some mapping approaches. The example that I'm going to use here is a set of local codes that are to be mapped to SNOMED CT. In this case, it will be a set consisting of 25 local codes representing a set of common diseases. So you can imagine an EHR which will use a subset like this as a value set in specific data entry controls. Okay, so let's just take a look at this, which is an example of a small subset of these 25 diseases. And you can have them in a spreadsheet or text editor like this, where you have two columns, one with the code and one with the associated term. And if I save this file as either a CSV or a tab TSV, so either a comma separated or tab separated text file, I can import that into the tool so that I can map them into SNOMED CT. And now I'll go to the tool. Okay. So snap.snomedtools.org is where you find the tool. And to log into the tool, you need a conference account, a SNOMED International conference account. And if you don't have one, then you can request one using this link down here. And then you just click on login, click on SNOMED, provide your username and password. And the last step is then to grant access so that to allow the system to use the details of your conference account profile. So I'll just grant access, and now I'm in the tool. Up here in the upper right corner is a short link to the user guide, and this is also where you log out. So to start a mapping, you'll need to create a map project, and I have 2 map projects here, but you can also create a new one. Clicking this Create Map button. You'll need to provide a title for the map, a version number, a description with some more details on the map, and then you need to select a code set. You may already have imported a code set, otherwise you can click on this plus button and you will get the opportunity to import the file. And this is the CSV or TSV file that I was talking about before. Then you also need to select a target version for your SNOMED CT version to use for this map. So whether you are using the content from the International Edition or other editions, you can see that there's a range of different editions and versions loaded here. Then we also specify the scope of a map, and there are some predefined scopes. And when you specify a scope for your map, this will determine what range of SNOMED CT concepts you can select from when you perform your mapping. So if you're mapping a set of disorders, you can either select the clinical finding hierarchy as the range, and you can see here that the ECL is populated below, representing that constraint. If you wanted it to only be disorders, you can also refine the ECL down here, or maybe it's something even more specific you want to do. You can have a custom ECL, and there's a link to the ECL quick reference. You also need to assign people to the project, and you can do that down here. There are different roles. Owners can create projects and create tasks. Members can author and review. Guests can view a map. And then you're actually ready to go down and save your project. I'm not going to create this new project. I'll use one that I have already created, where I have loaded in the set of 25 codes of common diseases. So I'll just click View. And you can see the 25 codes here. The last 5 are in the next page. So now I'm in the map. But in order for me to start mapping, I need to select a task. The tool have a ability to create tasks, both authoring tasks and review tasks, and then you can assign these tasks to people in your projects. But I have already created both an authoring and a review task, so I'll pick my review task, and then I'll look at these concepts that are ready to be mapped, or codes here. So heart disease. And the first approach that I can use to start mapping is to just use a text search up here. So I'll search for heart disease, and then the system it's a prefix match, and it will show the concepts that have descriptions matching these terms that I have entered. And then the fewer terms or the fewer letters I write, the more options I will have. And then to select a concept as the target, I can just drag it down. If I click the concept, you can see details appearing about the hierarchy and about the associated descriptions. Then I can specify the relation for this map, and I can also set this to mapped. Before it was unmapped. When I added the target, it was put into draft, and now I can then select mapped. So that's one approach. I can also click on the plus sign over here in the actions column. That will take me to the details view. And here you can see the source, and in this case is cancer. And now the system has automatically identified some candidate targets based on a lexical comparison of the source term and then the SNOMED CT descriptions. So here we have a range of automatically identified concepts. You can also see the result of the text search for cancer. And in the same way as before, when I click it, I can see details, but now I can drag it over to the appropriate target relationship. Then once I've done this, I can click on mapped either here or down here, and then I can move on to the next one. So it does the same as before in the other view, but here I'm just moving from one concept to another. So that's another approach to map. The last approach is to use the auto map feature. So when I click this, the system will automatically try to identify map targets for each of the remaining concepts that haven't been mapped. And now you can see that there are targets selected. And now I need to manually go in and decide what is the relationship and what is, and also change the status. So these are some of the approaches you can use to author a map in this tool. And in the same way, there is approaches to reviewing tasks, each map row, so whether you can accept or reject the mappings that have been performed. But I'm not going to show you that. You can go to the user guide to see the details. And within the next few weeks, we will add a series of videos describing each of these various things you can do in the tool. So please have a look at that. There's additional features such as exporting the map and updating to a new version or correcting maps. So please keep an eye out for the user guide with the new videos on this. So I'll move on to the next part of the presentation, which is around the SNOMED International browser. So I want to talk a bit about some of the new features that have been added, because the browser is always evolving, but there are two things that I'm keen on showing you today, and that is how we now support browsing different versions of SNOMED CT editions, and also how we have included as expression constraint builder. So I'll move back and go on to the browser. In the past, you have been able to select the edition you want to browse here, and then it loads the latest version of that edition. So I'll just go do that here. So now I'm in the International Edition. The new feature is this button up here, which allows you to browse, to jump to a different version of that edition you have selected here. Let us just look at an example. If I do a search for COVID-19, look up this concept, I can see how the concept for disease caused by severe acute respiratory syndrome, coronavirus 2 or COVID-19, how that's defined in the April version of the international release. You can see there's a set of subtypes, children and further subtypes, and also you can see the definition. But if I go back and look at the January 2020 version for this concept, you can see how it was defined then. At that time, the fully specified name for the concept was disease caused by a 2019 novel coronavirus. It had this definition and no subtypes. So this is a very easy way where you can explore how a concept has evolved in various versions within an edition. And when you select another edition, you can see you now have the ability to jump to the versions that we have loaded here. And again, when you do the search for concepts, we also have the flag to indicate, this is not a new feature, but it indicates the concepts that are specific within that module. So the next thing I want to show you is the expression constraint builder. So you may already be familiar with the expression constraints queries tab, where you can enter an expression constraint and execute it to see the results. But now we have added this expression constraint builder to help people construct expression constraints. And you can see here we have the symbols for the operators, but we have added the terms too, so it helps you to select the right one. So let's say I wanted to look for all subtypes of the COVID-19 concepts that have a finding side of the respiratory system. So I wanted to construct that expression constraint. I'll just go here and then I'll start typing COVID-19 as I did before, and I will have the concepts appearing here. So now I have created the simple expression constraint, show me all the descendants of COVID-19. But if I wanted to add a refinement, I could do that by clicking this button. And then I can select my attribute. And if I wanted to say diseases caused by COVID-19 with a finding side of the respiratory system, I know that I want the attribute that had to do with side. And you can see I just enter type or site, and it shows me finding side. Because I've selected a disease concept up here or a subtype of clinical finding, the system uses the concept model rules to determine what are the valid attributes within that domain. So I'm not giving the opportunity to select procedure side or the procedure side direct or indirect, because that's not a valid attribute for a clinical finding. So here I'm selecting the finding side. Then I need to select the range. So here it was the concept respiratory system that I wanted to add. So I'll just type that in. So I have structure of respiratory system. And again, the system uses the concept model rules to say, okay, we've selected finding site as our attribute. The range for that attribute is the anatomical acquired or the body structure concepts. So I'm only given the opportunity to select concepts within that range. So it's a very clever way to ensure that you stick within the concept model rules. And now you can see the expression constraint down here, and I can then click. When I click OK, it's populated here in the ECL query text box, and I can click execute, and you can see that 5 concepts are found. If I want to explore these results in more detail, I could do a lexical search for concepts with matching on something with infection here. And there are 2 concepts. You can also search, refine your search on specific description types, within language reference sets or within modules. So these are some of the enhancements that have been made to the browser to make it easier for our users to run expression constraints and define them. And with that, I want to hand over to Kai, who is going to talk a lot more about the newest features of the expression constraint language.
Thanks, Anna. Okay, yeah, the expression constraint language and some recent enhancements. So the expression constraint is a computable rule that can be used to define a set of concepts or clinical meanings, as Anna showed. And the latest version is of the language itself is 2.0 that was published this year. And here's an example of medium complexity expression constraint involving a selection of the hierarchy. This is a selection within a reference set. And then we have a group with some attributes. And this and many other examples are explained in full in the documentation snomed.org/ECL. Moving on, I wanted to talk about some of the new features within recent versions of the ECL language, starting with description filters, which were introduced in 1.5. So the description filter allows the results to be filtered on the descriptions of the matched concepts, including the term, the description type, and the language. And I'm going to demonstrate this. So I'm going to switch now to a development version of the browser because the latest ECL enhancements are not yet deployed to the production browser. They're coming. So here we've got a development version, and it says the ECL version that's active here. So we've got 2.0. In the production browser right now, I think it's on 1.3. So I'm going to demonstrate the description filter, where we can select descendants of clinical finding, where the descriptions have a term with a prefix of I in an FSN, in a US preferred FSN. The example I think was for the Australian dialect, but I switched it because I'm browsing the International Edition. I wouldn't match anything. So we've got various clinical findings with I in the preferred term, or as a prefix to one of the words in the preferred term. In 1.6, we introduced concept filters, and these allow for filtering on some of the concept properties like the definition status. The effective time is a useful one because you could find concepts that had been created since you last updated your reference set, for example, helpful with maintenance. And the member filters were introduced in 2.0, and these allow filtering on any of the fields that are specific to each type of reference set. So here in the example, we're filtering based on, we're filtering the members of the ICD-10 map, and we're using some of the columns which are specific to the complex map, the map group and the map target. And this example also demonstrates this syntax here with the angle brackets, which allows us to return specific fields from the matched reference set members in the results. So we'll run this one too in the dev environment. So we've matched the reference set members from the ICD-10 complex map in group 1 and with this map target, and we've also returned the reference component field and the map target field, so we can see those both. And so the big feature in the latest version of ECL is history supplements. And this feature is so significant that we gave ECL a new major version number, but this version is completely backward compatible with previous versions. So it just signifies a big feature, really, the 2.0. So as clinical records become older in record systems, they're more likely to contain SNOMED CT codes that have become inactive over time. And the history supplements feature allows those clinical records to still be included when using a selection using ECL through the use of historical associations. So here's the syntax here. In this example, we want to count the patients who have been referred to any service, and we're using descendants and self of referral to service, which will obviously only find the active concepts that are descendants of referral service. And then this syntax allows us to also select inactive concepts. For example, this one, referred to a radiology department, has been made inactive. But because it has a historical association to an active concept, then it will also be included in the selection. So there are 3 different profiles for this. The min, this one, there's a mod as well, and a max, mod for moderate. And these selections use different historical association types. So min is the most conservative selection. It only includes the same as associations, and max is the most liberal, including all historical association types. So I'm going to show this too in the development browser. I'm going to start, and I realize that's quite small. I apologize. I need to make this bigger for you, I expect. I'm going to start with very popular concept, asthma, popular for demonstrations. And I'm going to select the descendants of self of asthma. And we find 104 concepts. That's actually slightly too big. That's better. So that's only going to find the active concepts, because only active concepts have active relationships, so they can be found using the hierarchy queries. And then we're going to add the history supplement using min profile. And that should increase our selection from 104, and it should include concepts that have a same as association to the selection of active concepts. So we've gone up to 133, and the inactive concepts are added at the end. So we're doing a lot of scrolling for a demo. They're highlighted in red here. So we can see an example, acute asthma. This concept is inactive, but we know that it's going to have a historical association with the same as type to an active concept. There's another one called acute asthma, and that's why it's been made inactive. So if you have a patient that used this code in their clinical record, they'll still be found using the history supplement feature. I'll go on and use the other history profile. If we use history max, including all historical association types, it's very broad. we should increase our results further still, and we do, up to 179. Okay, that's it on ECL2. So as you can see, ECL is a powerful language for selecting clinical meanings and finding patient records. And implementers can make use of this capability with minimal effort by designing a service-based architecture that includes terminology services. So terminology services are a rapid and effective way for implementers to deploy SNOMED CT capabilities and to easily leverage SNOMED CT specific features without developing their own terminology server or ECL engine in-house. It's just not necessary. So the APIs are standardized using the HL7 FHIR specification, and this allows for maximum compatibility and reuse between tooling. And there are open source and commercial options available with different levels of support. So also, terminology services are a way of isolating your implementation from changes in the release format or other changes related to the evolution of SNOMED CT, some of which Alejandro touched on earlier. So it's definitely an attractive option. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the Snowstorm terminology server, which is developed by SNOMED International. It's a great way to get started with terminology services, has a very permissive open source Apache D license. You should be able to stand up your own SNOMED CT via terminology server in less than an hour. And there will be an enhancement later this year to support other code systems in Snowstorm. Currently, it only can host SNOMED CT based code systems, but it will be able to host LINC and ICD and others. And there's the GitHub link to Snowstorm there. So this terminology server is used to host the SNOMED International browser and the SNOMED CT authoring platform. A list of other terminology servers is available in the tooling section of the implementation portal, which Linda will share a link in later slides. So putting this all together, I'd like to show the SNOMED CT user interface demonstrator. Now, this is an open source tool to demonstrate some of the best practice techniques for building a structured user interface for SNOMED data entry. And the user interface takes advantage of SNOMED CT's unique features, including its logical design with concepts, descriptions, and relationships, and it uses FHIR terminology services. Now, this is not a new demonstration, but we don't want anyone who's new to the community to miss it. So I'll switch to the demo. So the demonstrator has a few screens. The first is for entering patient details here. And you'll see that the fields that use SNOMED CT are marked for demonstration purposes with a blue S. And each one of these has an information pop-up attached to it to explain the design choices that are being demonstrated. On the patient details tab, there are fields for sex and smoking status. These have limited choices, so drop-downs and radio buttons are populated just by small lists of SNOMED codes that allow the correct concepts to be chosen for storage on the clinical record. Now, if we move to the encounter screen, you can enter a reason for the encounter. You might start entering stomach pain. Ooh. And you should see, although we're not seeing anything, you can spot the mistake. Nothing at all. I'm going to reload the page. Typical on a live demo. Should have recorded it. Yeah, okay. So you should see, as we type, we should see the selection changing, and it starts to show results with each letter we type. And it's actually matching on every synonym of each concept, but it's displaying the preferred term of those matched concepts. So we've typed stomach pain, and you'll see that the first result is stomach ache, even though this doesn't match the words that we've typed in. And the concept stomach ache has a synonym of stomach pain, and that's why we're seeing this in the results. So let's move to the diagnosis. Now, this time we're going to diagnose the patient with appendicitis. And if I type append, you'll see that the first result is appendicitis, and I'll select that. And if we look in the information box, it explains that the user interface is communicating with the terminology server behind the scenes using the HL7 FHIR API and executing the SNOMED's expression constraint language to restrict the values that the user can enter, to only allow subtypes of clinical finding to be entered in this field. And this is called terminology binding. And it's important to ensure that the right type of concept gets recorded in each field of the user interface. Now I'm going to show the network panel as we've got an implementer audience. And I'm going to go to the procedure input, and I'm going to type append again. But this time we find appendicectomy because it's a procedure. And that's how this input is restricted. So if we look in the information box, we can see that the procedure options are retrieved here using a straightforward ECL, descendants of procedure. And we can look in the network panel and we can see the FHIR API calls that are being made. So here we've got a call to a FHIR API, and a value set expand operation is being performed. And it's an intentional value set defined using an ECL statement with a filter, a text filter of append. So that's all we needed to do to get the correct results. You can try out this demo yourself. It's available at snomed.org/UI, or if you'd like to download the open source software, that's available in the GitHub repository. And that's all on terminology services. It's back to you, Linda.
Great, thanks very much, Kai. So I'm going to finish off by introducing some of our resources. To find our implementation support resources, the best place to start is our new portal. And you can find the new portal at snomed.org/support. The portal has 6 main areas. It has a library where you can find a range of different implementation frameworks, guidance documents and specifications. We then have our training area, which explains our SNOMED courses and our learning pathways, which are free for everyone who lives in a member country or territory. Implementation workshops can be arranged through our customer relations team. And if you're not sure who that is, then please email info@snomed.org. Our tooling area is a popular area, and I'll show you this soon. It explains all the different types of tools that you might need to implement SNOMED CT, from browsers to mapping tools and terminology servers to natural language processing. And then for each type of tool, it explains the role of the tool, the typical functionality, and we provide a link to a range of both open source and commercial tools in that category. We have our user groups, from SNOMED on Fire to our computable languages group, our mapping tool user group, drug extension user group, translation user group, and our clinical reference groups. And finally, our help desk, which I'll talk more about shortly. So please visit snomed.org/support to explore these different areas. And I will just jump across here to quickly show you snomed.org/support. This is our implementation support portal. There are a number of ways to navigate. I'll talk a bit about our adoption journey soon. our implementation process, but these are the 6 main areas that I just talked to. So our tooling space is quite popular. As I said, there's all the different types of tools that you might need to implement SNOMED, and I'll just choose terminology services since that's an important area. As I said, we talk a bit about the functionality, the SNOMED International Snowstorm product, and a list of other commercially available terminology servers as well. Quite a few different areas to explore, so please feel free to get on and have a look. As I mentioned, our SNOMED adoption journey provides a way to navigate through all of the resources in the portal, depending on what stage of the adoption journey that you're at. So whether you're getting started with SNOMED, whether you're preparing for your implementation's in progress, or you're leveling up to the next maturity level, it helps to provide a curated list of resources designed for that stage of the adoption journey. Another way of navigating through the implementation resources is to follow the SNOMED implementation process. So that's a 6-step process that helps you to navigate through that implementation. The first step in any implementation is to understand your existing eHealth environment and key goals. And at that stage, you may need to access some of our guides or some strategy templates. Step 2 is to define your focus use cases and business objectives for using SNOMED. So this may require a planning workshop or considering the value proposition work that I mentioned earlier on. Step 3 is to design your eHealth architecture. So this may include terminology services and really understanding where SNOMED fits into your overall architecture within your system and between systems. So in designing and understanding your eHealth architecture, that should help to identify what SNOMED artifacts you need to develop, whether they're maps or translations or extensions or subsets and reference sets. Once you have that architecture in place, then step 4 is to create your SNOMED artifacts. And this is where you might need some tools for developing those maps or subsets, etc., and perhaps some best practice guidance in how to do that. In step 5, you're implementing those artifacts into your clinical system, and you may be interested in sharing your experiences in user groups or learning more from the FAQs. And then in step 6, this is where you measure, reflect, and plan your improvements. You may want to consider the SNOMED maturity and certification frameworks. So these are just some of the examples, but for more information, please visit snomed.org/support. And finally, we have a huge range of resources available to help you. We have our free education courses at courses.ihsgestotools.org. We're just very soon going to be launching a brand new foundation course, which is very nice. And I would also recommend our implementation and terminology services course. Terminology services, as Kai explained, a really fast, effective way of implementing. So that's a great way to learn more about them and to understand how to use them. You can also explore all of our implementation resources, as I said, at snomed.org/support. And if you only remember one link today, can I ask you to remember this one link, snomed.org/links. This is a site we've put together to collect all of our popular links across the SNOMED platforms. So snomed.org/links, it groups them together into different categories. So if you're after some education, then look in the education section. We've got an implementation section, guides and specifications, groups, content, and software tools. So it provides a good collection of popular and useful links to look around. And if you need to get some help, there are 3 main ways to ask for help. You can send a question to our help desk at info@snomed.org. You can join our public Slack channel at public.snomedintel.slack.com. And if you have any questions that relate to any of our open source tools, you can raise an issue in the relevant GitHub repo at github.org/IHSDO. There are also a range of different ways you can participate in the SNOMED community. And you can see all of the meetings that are available to join at our SNOMED calendar, snomed.org/WOTW. That stands for What's On This Week, WOTW. And I'll just jump across snomed.org/What's On This Week. And as you can see, a range of different user groups. There's a SNOMED on Fire. Here's the implementation web series that you're currently at. So it provides a way of knowing what meetings are available to join and access. And please mark your calendars for September 29 and 30 this year. It's our annual SNOMED CT Expo. And this year we'll be holding it as a hybrid event. So you can either join us in Lisbon in Portugal, or you can connect online. And our next web series webinar will be held on June the 29th. Dr. Stefan Schultz will be presenting at our SNOMED CT research web series. So please follow the link snomed.org/web-series to find the registration for that. And finally, if you'd like to join our SNOMED implementation community and be notified of any upcoming implementation webinars and other SNOMED implementation news, please visit snomed.org/USRG. Scroll down to find the registration form and fill this in to join the user support reference group. So that's the end of the presentation. I've seen there's lots of questions have come in online, which is wonderful, but we have a few minutes now to answer any other questions. If you'd like to ask a question, could I ask you just to raise your hand, which should appear on the menu at the bottom of the Zoom link. And once you've raised your hand, we will open up your microphone so you can ask the question directly. Are there any questions that anyone's seen that we haven't got to online?
Rory's been busy answering lots. Thanks, Rory.
Yeah, thanks, Rory. Any questions online? If you'd like to raise your hand.
We didn't hide anyone in the audience, did we, with a pre-canned question?
No, we didn't. No, we didn't. Does anyone have a question that they asked that hasn't been answered that they'd like to bring to our attention? Here's one that's just come in. Could you please tell us if a French version of SNOMED will be released? We do have the common French translation. Does anyone else like to add to that?
Yeah, one thing is the French language that Canada and Belgium and Netherlands are working on translating SNOMED to the French language, and they're working collaboratively to have a common French edition. And another thing is the edition from France. The country maybe will create a national extension in the future. Yeah, exactly.
Yes, we're looking forward to France becoming a member. So
yeah,
that will be exciting when that happens.
And national editions are released by each of the countries. It's not something that SNOMED International releases. So the US releases the US edition, and UK and Australia and France will do the same at some point. And
I believe the French common translation is on the community content area.
Yeah, I think so.
So perhaps we can share a link. Thank you for your lovely comments. Erin? And Thierry Klein just said in Belgium, they have a French release every 6 months. That's wonderful. Thank you. Well, if there are no other questions, we might wrap up here. Please feel free to reach out and contact us at info@snomed.org if you think of any questions after the fact. Otherwise, have a wonderful day and thanks for joining us, everyone. Thank you.